Hello everyone and welcome to another very interesting and very exciting game, also from the Tournament of Peace held in Zagreb, Vassily Ivanchuk versus Robert Zelčić, and I didn't think I'd be showing any more videos, more games from this event, but I forgot to mention in the previous video that Chucky won the event without losing a single game, so I decided to show another video and also show the final standings. So without further ado, let's check it out. With the white pieces, Chucky opens with d4. We have knight to f6 by Zelčić, c4, we have e6, sorry about that. Knight to c3 and bishop to b4, the Nimzo-Indian defense. We have knight to f3 and b6 by Zelčić. Bishop to d2, we have bishop to b7, fianchettoing the light square bishop, and now g3. Chucky is ready to do the same. We have castles and bishop to g2. And now d6 is the common, well, the most played move here, but we have c5 by Zelčić. It's quite a rare move, although it has been played before. We have d captures on c5, and here Boris Gelfand had this position with white against Vladimir Kramnik in the 2005 Amber tournament, and Kramnik won that game. He played bishop captures on c5, but here we have b captures on c5, which extremely rare, and here we have just castles by Chucky. And knight to c6 is a known move in this position, but here we have d6, and it is as of move 9 that we have a completely new game. So here, Chucky continues development with queen to c2, developing the queen, connecting rooks, knight b to d7, black also wants to continue development, and now rook f to d1. As the d6 pawn is a backwards pawn, it should be a target for the rest of the game, so Chucky is getting ready to pile up on the d6 target. We have queen to e7, again, just developing the queen, connecting rooks, adding one of the defenders to the pawn here, and now bishop to f4. And here, this is a target, and it's not easy to defend this. So you kind of have to either, you want to push d5 at some point in the game, but it's never a good moment. For example, even if you try like bishop captures on c3 to remove one of the defenders, just the bishop captures on d6 is much faster. You're gonna lose the rook, and white will just win the game. So here e5, it does prevent bishop captures on d6, but on the other hand, you no longer have e6 to help you push d5 in the future, so this pawn is staying here pretty much for the rest of the game. We have bishop to g5, now comes bishop captures on c3, queen captures on c3, and now h6, attacking the bishop. The bishop doesn't have good squares to retreat, so just the bishop captures on f6, knight captures on f6, and now knight to h4, offering a trade of light square bishops, and of course if black declines, the knight can even come to f5, which will be an excellent square, and this will add another attacker to the d6 pawn. So here Zelčić captures with bishop captures, knight captures, and now rook f to b8, not allowing white b4, so grabbing more control of the b4 square. We have knight to e3. Now the knight can also come either to d5 or to f5, depends on where it's needed. Queen to e6, and now comes f3, just taking away the e4 and the g4 squares from the black knight. We have rook to b6, and now comes rook to d2. Chucky prepares to double up rooks on the d file to add more attackers to the d6 pawn, and of course this rook is already nicely defending it, while Zelčić wants to double up on the b file and create some threats against the b2 pawn. We have g6, making a safer square for the king, and now rook 8 to d1, adding another attacker to the d6 pawn, rook 8 to b8 now, adding an attacker to the b2 pawn. b3, just getting that out of the way, and now king to h7. Improving the safety of the king, king g2, Chucky does the same, and now rook back to a8. There aren't any good breakthrough moves. In the future, black should have some breakthrough moves, maybe with e4 or h5, h4, maybe a5, a4, but for the moment he goes rook to a8, probably with the idea of playing a5, a4. Chucky stops it with queen to a5, and now h5. Trying to create some other ideas on the other side of the board, as the white queen is now all the way on the queen side. We have h3, having a flexible setup. Now, okay, if you push the pawn, you can always push g4, it's not a problem. King to g7, king to h2. We have king back to h7 here. Both of them are testing to see what the other guy is doing. knight back to g2, and now knight back to g8. We have knight back to e3 by Chucky, and now knight back to e7. King to g2, and now king to g7. And here, rook to d3. Hard to say if rook to d3 is actually doing anything. Probably just another slow maneuvering move, but then again, it's Chucky. You know, who knows? And like like I said, it might be inviting e4, so that's maybe that's why he did it. Also, h4 is an idea. If h4, g4 is a very nice idea. If e4, this is very concrete. You would get queen to c3 check first, f6 blocking check, and now f captures on e4, and then queen captures with check, king to g1. So maybe this is what Chucky wanted on the board. For the game just to continue, so he doesn't have to repeat moves, but Zelčić goes for f5 instead, which is a very committal move, as it lowers the safety of the black king. But then again, you have much more support when you want to make a breakthrough with the pawns. So here Chucky finds a very interesting idea. He goes knight to d5, and the knight to d5, okay, you should definitely capture it. You do not want this knight on d5. Also, your rook is under attack, so you have to react. We have knight captures and rook captures on d5, and here e4, going for the breakthrough. But here Chucky has a very interesting tactic, so feel free to pause the video and try to find Chucky's idea here while I give you a couple of seconds. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding such a nice tactic. It's not an easy move to find. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's rook captures on d6. Yes, it does look a bit weird as d6 is guarded twice, but then again, that's why the knight was traded. So there's no knight on e7, queen to c7 will come with check. So now if you capture it immediately, queen to c7 check, and you pick up the rook, so it's not a problem. First, e captures on f3 with check, and now, okay, if you capture with the pawn, then you have queen to e2 check. Of course, you don't want to allow this. After e captures on f3 with check, we have king captures on f3, and now Zelčić has to decide what to do here. Whether to capture right away, or does he want to go for queen to e4 check. Queen to e4 check is very complicated, but we will show it as it's very interesting. For example, queen e4 check, king retreats, king f2, and now f4, just going for it. Queen back to c3, bringing the queen back into the defense. You don't have time for something like rook captures here, even though it does seem like it's winning material. But f captures on g3 with check is enough for black to draw the game. For example, you cannot capture if king captures, queen to e3 check, and then you can bring the other rook into the attack. You will, well, whatever you do, you will be completely lost here. You can deliver check here. The king has to move once again. If you go here, then even h4 is an idea. You want to open up lines, and here white is just dead lost. But all in all, it would be enough for him to draw the game. So after f4, you will have to go for queen to c3 check. You have to bring the queen back into the defense. And now after the king moves, now, for example, if g4, then you go rook captures on d6, rook captures on d6, and h captures on g4. One of the possible lines, h captures on g4, and queen to e7 now, not allowing queen to f6, and now, for example, queen h3 check, king g7, and now rook to d5. All in all, whatever black does, white will always be up that one pawn and in a better position, since Chucky so conveniently grabbed it with rook captures on d6. But okay, after king captures on f3, Zelčić doesn't enjoy queen to e4 right away. First, he trades once, rook captures on d6, we have queen to c7 check now, the point of our variation, king to h8, and now queen captures on d6. Chucky offers a trade of queens, which you cannot accept. If you trade captures, then your white's position is just too easy. You're already attacking g6. If you defend it, just h4. You're gonna go king f4, king g5, grab this pawn. All of these pawns are falling, so would be completely winning for white. So after queen captures on d6, now we have queen to e4 check. Zelčić doesn't want to trade queens. King f2 and rook to e8 now, going after the e2 pawn. So Chucky defends it, and now comes queen to e3 with check. King to g2, and now king h7. The king will be much safer on h6. We have queen to f4, again offering a trade. Here, you could capture, for example, queen captures, g captures, and go rook to e3. It does prevent the white king from getting activated. For example, if king f2, you're going to pick up the pawn here. And even if rook to h4, then if king attacks the rook, you can go rook to h3 and go after the pawn. So this might actually be a viable plan for black. But Zelčić prefers to keep the queens on the board. We have queen to e7 and now king f2. Just bringing the king closer, so the rook might also be activated. The king is now helping out with the defense, but as long as black has this queen-rook battery along the e-file, it's not going to be that easy. We have a5 by Zelčić, and now h4 by Chucky. And here we have a4. Yes, this breaks up the pawn structure on the queen side, but it's not all that problematic since Chucky now gets a passed pawn here. We have rook to a8, now he wants to collect, gobble up all of these pawns, and now rook to d6. The idea is, okay, you're going to worry about the passed pawn here. I'm going to play, for example, rook to c6, followed by rook to c7. Maybe I can win your queen. We have rook captures on a4, now comes rook to c6, threatening rook to c7, but now rook to a7. Of course, not allowing rook to c7, and now a4. Chucky is now free to push the passed a pawn, since you can never capture due to rook to c7. We have queen to d7 now, attacking the rook here, but now rook captures on c5. Only now do you capture it. You basically trade this pawn for the passed a pawn, but you now have a passed c pawn. So queen captures on a4, and now comes rook to c7 check. Yes, now you've traded this pawn for this pawn, and the material is still Chucky's up a pawn, but the problem is now Chucky can trade rooks, and well, most of the times when you have a queen and pawn endgame, it will also be that you should be able to win it. There will always be some way, but here it's just much easier. Here black is in check, king to h6, and now again this is just a beautiful position and a very instructive one because, well, you will often find yourselves in positions where you're queen against a queen and a pawn. So feel free to pause the video here and try to find the best move for white while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on being an excellent centralizer of the queen. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's, well, first let's see if c5, which is of course you want to push your passed pawn, it's already protected here, you allow queen to d4 check, and then you allow a lot of checks, because here the queen is just controlling way too many squares, and it will be way too easy for you to harass the white king. There are just so many ways you can do it. So not really something you want to do. If instead you found queen to f7, which guards the pawn, and then maybe, depending on what black plays, maybe you can start pushing it later, also works. But there is a move that Chucky played that is the best. It's queen to e5, and it's just a beautiful centralizing move. Point is that if you now capture the pawn, queen to h8 is mate, one of the reasons why this pawn is so nicely placed on h4. So you cannot, of course, accept the pawn. We have king to h7, and only now does Chucky push the passed pawn. We have c5, we have queen to c6 blocking the passed pawn, and now queen e7 check. King to h6, and now queen to d6 check. Black cannot afford a queen trade because the passed pawn is simply too quick. You can see that the black king is way outside the square of the pawn. So we have queen to h1, hoping to harass the white king from behind, but it will not work. Chucky pushes c6, queen to h2 check, we have king to e3, and now queen to g1 check. We have king to d2, so no more checks, and now queen to b1, hoping to continue the harassment, but c7. We have queen to a2 with check, king back to e3, now queen to a7 check, we have king to d3, and queen to a8, guarding the queening square, but it's not a problem. We have queen to c5, now threatening just to promote the pawn to a queen. Queen to c8 blocking, and here Chucky played king to d2, and it was in this position that Robert Zelčić resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. You could just play something like queen d6, threaten this, but then you might allow some checks. Chucky doesn't want to allow any checks, so he just plays king to d2, and the next, well, you could go queen d7 check, king e1, now you have to go back blocking, but now you just play queen d6, next move you're going to bring the queen here, and it's a game over. Whatever you play, any move you play, you're just gonna go push the king back, king goes back, doesn't really matter where, queen d8, offer a queen trade. Of course, you cannot accept this. Queen to a6, you will still try to harass the white king a little bit, but after you bring the other queen into the game, you will have you will have little luck doing it. King f2, and there are no more useful. Okay, queen a7 check, king g2, and now there are no more useful checks, and you can just resign here. It'd be interesting if you had maybe some stalemating options, but you don't. You have too many pawn moves, and it's just not possible. If it was a completely blockaded position, okay, you could play something like this and try to get a stalemate, but unfortunately there are too many pawn moves, and white, of course, is not forced to capture any queens. So after king to d2, Zelčić resigned, and yet another excellent victory for Chucky. And here we do have the standings, so let's just show it. Chucky won the tournament with 7.5 out of 11, followed by Bosiocic, Etienne Bacrot, and Hrant Melkumian with 7 out of 11. Then with 6 out of 11, Markus Rager and Ivan Chaparinov. Then with 5, Liviu Dieter Nisipianu. Then with 4.5, Zdenko Kožul and Robert Zelčić, followed by Alexei Drev, and then Hrvoje Stević and Mladen Palac. So very nice tournament for Chucky, and by not losing a single game, 7.5 out of 11 is a lot, and he is back in the 2700 club, which we mentioned in the previous video, but in case you missed it. So yeah, that concludes this tournament, our little short Chucky saga. So I do hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see where it goes. I would like to thank Peter Mataga and Teja Kulkarni for contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions, and as always, checking up on everything that happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your Sunday. Or if it's already Monday where you're at, hope you're enjoying that as well.